Today we're here at Blackpool Airport at ANT with Casey the pilot. Casey's a 737 pilot for a well-known UK airline. During lockdown though, he's not just created a YouTube channel, he's built an app, he built a blog, and now he's written a book, How to Become an Airline Pilot in Europe. It's a total must read for anyone that's thinking about becoming a pilot in the UK or in Europe. And also you can win a signed copy of this book from Casey. Please comment below, tell me why you should win this book, and we'll get one in the post to you very soon. Anyway, I hope you enjoy this video. Let's go. So Kudzi, how did it all begin? Where did your love of aviation start from?
Yeah, well, it started from a really young age. I always was fascinated by airplanes, playing around with plane toys and so on. But the real access to it for me started at school, and that was through the Air Cadets. And I recommend that to everybody. The Air Cadets have so many opportunities. You start off by doing air experience flights, which is like a 20-minute or half-an-hour flight, once a year or maybe a few more times if you're fortunate. And then after that, you have access to gliding introductory courses, which I did, and then I went on to a gliding scholarship, and then after that, I then did my flying scholarship. So by the time I left school, I got probably close to about 15-20 hours completely free already.
Brilliant.
So yeah, it was cool. That's what I'll probably say.
So I know that you didn't go straight into aviation as a career. So you worked, and then it was a few years ago, and then you had to switch into commercial aviation. So what made you change?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I knew I wanted to fly professionally. I went to university. I studied aerospace engineering, and I wanted to have a solid foundation. Just to have a backup plan, because you never know what can happen, particularly in these times that we're in. But when I finished in 2008, it was in the middle of the financial crisis, so there were just no jobs at all in aviation. I was fortunate. I found a really good internship position with an oil and gas company, and then that developed into a graduate position. And I was super happy. I was learning a lot. I was enjoying myself. But I constantly had this thing in the back of my mind saying, "Oh, I really want to go and fly airplanes." But every time I looked, it just didn't seem right. I'll give you an example. A lot of my friends were finishing their flight training and having to spend 18 months or 24 months in a hold pool waiting for employment. I just thought there's no point in that. But then later on, probably close to 2014, 2015, it then started to change. A friend of mine, the captain at a certain airline that flies A320, sent me a link saying their airline were looking for cadets for an MPL program. So I went for it, got to the final stage, but didn't get in, which was a really good blessing in disguise actually, because I then realized I didn't actually need to spend 100, 110, 120,000 pounds. I could take my PPL, which I already had, and my 86 hours, which wasn't a lot, but it was still a good step. And then I realized I didn't need a lot to get to the end. So at that point then, it wasn't a risk. I didn't have to leave my job. I could do it alongside my job. And then I finished, and was lucky enough to finish at a time where there was a real shortage of pilots. The industry was booming. So I had, multiple job offers within just a couple of months of finishing. So yeah.
We've had quite a few questions in from Instagram and Facebook.
Yeah, thank you everyone, by the way, who's sent questions in. That's been really good. And thanks for supporting both of us, I guess, yeah.
What was the hardest part of applying to an airline? And someone's asked, what would be your, what was your best tip to make an individual stand out at an assessment day?
Good point. So the hardest part for the airline assessment, for me, I thought, was the psychometric testing, because there's no interaction. You don't have a chance to build a rapport. It's just purely a computer game, if I can say such a thing. But the good thing is, you can prepare to a certain extent. There's various companies that offer help and prep in that instance. And one of the best things I can recommend for anybody, okay, the time right now in COVID is pretty poor trying to find an airline job, but hopefully things come back, is just apply for everything and everywhere, because what that gives you is a lot of practice in your interview technique, in practicing some of the psychometric testing. So hopefully when you get that job that you're desperate to, or the airline that you're desperate to work for, you can make the job.
How do you plan to progress your career, and do you think that COVID slowed that progression down slightly? I mean, what's your thoughts?
It's everyone's ultimate goal. I mean, I'm in no rush. I don't fancy at the minute being the one going into Dortmund on a dark wintry night when it's blowing a gale. I don't want that right now. But I'm sure in time, once the experience builds and you grow as a pilot, then absolutely, I would absolutely love to be in the left-hand seat one day.
So talking about flying into airports, actually, what is the most challenging airport or airfield that you've flown into so far?
Yeah, that's a good question. So all the different airfields that we've flown into, or I've flown into, give some sort of different challenge. I guess the real standout ones for me is probably the Greek islands. Perhaps the infrastructure is not as advanced, and what I mean by that in terms of you haven't got ILS, so you're doing non-precision approaches, RNAVs and so on, and there's also quite a lot of terrain, so it gives you quite a lot to think about. And on top of that, you've also got high temperatures, and typically the wind might be tailwind and so on and so forth. It's all this kind of thing, but it's really rewarding when an approach is well flown and you get the passengers where they want to be and it's all done safe and well. So yeah, absolutely.
So someone's asked, what are your top 5 tips for an airline interview? I know this might be in the book, but
no.
Have you got a 5, or have you got any particular top tips that would be good for an interview when you maybe your first interview, you haven't been for an interview for many years, or
So there are 2 books that I read that changed my life without trying to sound a bit odd. The first one was How to Win Friends and Influence People by, I think, Dale Carnegie. That's a great book, and it just gives a little bit about the psychology of kind of the human being and the human aspect. Not that you're trying to manipulate everybody to get to what you want, but you can certainly make yourself a lot more likable and avoid some of the obvious mistakes that could potentially polarize you in an interview. The other really good book, which I found to be absolutely immense, was 101 Interview Questions. Hopefully there'll be a link for this in the description. But yeah, that's really good, and it just gives you the different types of questions you're likely to be asked in an interview. And there's not that many, although it's 100 different interviews, 100 different interview questions. They're all typically certain types and fall into similar categories, and that helped me a lot. I think that would be the one. So that's like on the interview technique. For the next one, which is the flying, hands down one of the most important aspects. And I know there's a lot of discussion about which MCC course, which multi-crew course shall I do? Shall I pay for the APS? Shall I just do MCC JARC and so on and so forth? But I did the APS, and hands down, the amount of confidence that gives you going into the job, the assessment. It's not guaranteed that you will get it if you do APS, but it's a pretty high percentage. You probably will. Definitely helped me. And also preparing well. In my assessments, I met candidates who prepared extremely well, and I met others who weren't as well prepared. It's expensive to prepare for an interview because you've got to pay for your sim prep and so on and so forth. But the way I looked at it was, you're not interviewing for a right-hand seat position, because most airlines want to hire the captains of the future. It might not happen tomorrow, it may not happen in 3 years, it may not happen in 5 years, but eventually they want you to make the transition. So you need to approach it with the mindset and the seriousness of, hey, I'm actually being interviewed here to fly $100 million jet or $200 million jet in the left-hand seat. And once you make that switch in mindset, it's pretty straightforward.
Just talking about interviews, do you think being a little bit older than fresh out of 18, 19-year-old, fresh out of integrated course, do you think that helped you come across in your interview process and with the different mindset?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, no, I don't want to offend anybody. I've got some great friends who went straight into integrated courses, came out, landed jobs, great guys, and they do the job extremely well. But what I think being a little bit older helps you is it gives you a little bit more life experience, and you tend to have a little bit more resilience. So when things aren't going well, it's probably not going to be your first setback. You've probably had setbacks before, so you know how to deal with them and how to get yourself in the right frame of mind mentally. That said, the younger you are, it's no secret, Formula One drivers are typically pretty young guys. It's because the reaction speeds are quicker, they learn faster and so on, so you have different advantages for you. So yeah, I think if you're younger, you'll learn much quicker. If you're older, your learning might not be as fast, but you've got other things that can help you with your life experience and so on. So yeah, that's I guess what I'd say on that one.
So you mentioned that obviously you're a first officer for a very well-known airline in the UK, based out of Manchester, and you're on the 737. But what is the favourite part of the 737 that you love flying? Is there a particular feature, or what is there anything you have?
Yeah, so again, this is just my opinion, and my opinion, and doesn't represent anyone else's opinion. But I believe we're probably the last generation of pilots to fly the type of airplane that we fly. and I think the 737, which was originally built in the 60s, has a lot of the, you know, yoke, rudder pedals, stick, throttle, hand-eye coordination. It's in there. There is automation in the aircraft, but you still have to land it yourself, and you don't have much aids by the way of electronic assistance, like for example completely fly-by-wire aircraft such as the Airbus A320 would. And it's a great aircraft to learn on because you have to approach things in a different way, you know, in terms of your understanding of the energy. You don't have a flight control computer that's going to stop you doing more than a 1G bang turn, for example. It's you who's putting the control input in. Yeah, I just love flying that kind of raw aircraft and just enjoying it, because I suspect that all future generations of aircraft that come out, and which are already coming out, will probably be all fly-by-wire. And with the increase in automation, I saw Airbus had successfully done a completely automated taxi out, takeoff and landing using image recognition, for example. And I think as that starts to come into play, then yeah, the conventional type of aircraft as we see here will probably be a thing of the past, almost be like a classic car.
I guess it's probably maybe the closest you can get to flying a GA, like a Piper they're in, right?
Exactly. I mean, people often say it's a big Cessna, and I think that's pretty accurate, actually.
So, what qualities do airlines look for in a candidate?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I'd say a really good starting point for anybody is to look at the 8 ICAO pilot competencies. I'm going to try and rattle them off, and I'll probably get them wrong, but aircraft flight path management manual. So if you go to an airline assessment, they would expect you to fly raw data ILS. Aircraft flight path management automation, so understanding how the automation works and all that, problem solving, leadership, decision making, time management, all those sort of things are competencies I think that are important for any airline pilot. One of the really important things I think is you don't necessarily have to develop, or you won't necessarily develop all those competencies purely sat here, flying from A to B. A lot of, for me anyway, for the softer sides, time management, problem solving, teamwork and so on, I managed to get a lot of those from outside of the flight deck. So I'd encourage people just to, particularly if you're in the younger years, get involved in extracurricular activities, or for those that are slightly older, never underestimate the qualities in your current job that you can potentially transfer across if you're in the middle of, trying to get your qualifications up to make the jump eventually.
So here at Blackpool A&T, but where did you train, and what kind of, everyone always asks about how expensive was your training, how much did you spend, so yeah. I don't know if you're able to give us any indication really.
Yeah, that's a good question. So first of all, I forgot to say massive thanks to A&T for letting us come down and shoot the video. I did most of my L building in this actual aircraft, so yeah, A&T always remains pretty close to me. But my PPL, I did a Barton Raven there. I was pretty lucky. I won a PPL scholarship by the Honourable Company of Air Pilots and Air Navigators, so I didn't have to pay for my PPL. So I'd recommend people look at scholarships, Air Cadets, Air League, and then the Honourable Company of Air Pilots. Then once I had my PPL building, most of it was done in Blackpool. Did my night rating here at A&T as well, and then I booked some time off to do my hour building. But unfortunately the weather was really rubbish in December, so I ended up doing my IMC rating here, and the side benefit of that was I was able to do a competency-based instrument rating. And then from there I did my CPL just next door with West Air. They were absolutely terrific. Anyone looking to try and get their CPL, you don't need to do it on a DF42 on a twin, just save money and do it on a single. And then my IR at PTT in Leeds, unfortunately they've gone out of business. It wasn't because of my flying, before anyone goes there. And then finally I did my APS FCC with VA Airline Training. I think all in I was somewhere about 65, 70k, something like that to get the all my qualifications. I could have done it for slightly less, but I just, yeah, the great thing of modular flight training is you can pitch it where you want. So just as an example, I bought a Bose headset, an A20. You don't need to have an A20 headset, but I just decided I wanted one. I got an iPad for an EFB with Sky Demon, and then later when I was doing IR work, full flight with all the Jeppeson's plates. So yeah, it's just little things like that I kind of added that I didn't necessarily need to do. I did most of my air building in this Cherokee. I could have done it in my 152 for probably 10 or 15 pounds an hour less, but I didn't want to fly around at 80 knots. so yeah, it just depends what you want to do.
And I know there's a lot more information in the book about how to become a pilot on the modular route. So please go and read the book. The link's in the description below.
Thank you so much for that.
It's a fantastic read. But we'll come back to the book in a second. But someone's asked, what are your thoughts on modular pilots post-COVID and the market recovering? I mean, someone's asked whether you think that airlines may revert back to the integrated route, preferring those type of candidates rather than going through the modular route. What's your opinion? What do you think?
From my experience, when I finished, it's difficult to tell what's going to happen after COVID because, frankly, if anybody says they know, they don't know, they're lying to you. But from my experience, what I found is no airline, well, all the ones I applied to, didn't really care where you came from on what route your training was. What they're looking for is the competency and your ability to work as a flight crew. And there were a couple of developments that happened during my training, which I think were really good in opening the doors for modular pilots. So first of all, we had the EasyJet Amy Johnson initiative that opened up to taking pilots from any background on the basis that you do an MCC with them and then eventually go into a type rating and so on. And then the next one, which is really, really key, was British Airways again opening the employment out to everybody. And I think that's really, really massive for all the guys who are self-funded modular, because it means you don't have to be tied to a massive flight school. No, and I'm sure those flight schools are great, but integrated full-time flying is not always the best solution for everybody. And I urge everyone just to have a think and consider what options would work best for your current situation. It would have been a disaster for me to go integrated because I wouldn't have been able to work, but other people I've met who I fly with and work with have said I could never imagine trying to do my ATPLs by myself distance learning. So fair enough, there's many different paths and avenues to take to where you want to get to.
Do you have any regrets about modular training?
Absolutely. I just wish I'd started earlier. But that's other than that, no. But then if I'd started earlier, maybe the market wouldn't have been good in terms of finding a job. And again, I was super fortunate to finish at a time where there was such an amount of airline recruitment activity. I think when I applied for my jobs, I was easily able to send an application every single day for a solid 4 weeks, and I never ran out of places to apply to. So that's how good the market was at the time.
Yeah. I mean, someone had asked how hard it was to find your first job, but you've mentioned a few times now you had several offers.
Yes, absolutely. But that wasn't unique to me. I mean, anybody who'd done the training and finished well and prepared well for the assessments. I knew one person who had 5 different job offers.
Really?
Yeah, but it was the time that we're in. Summer of 2018, rolling into the autumn of 2018 was just incredibly buoyant for recruitment, and so much activity as well. So yeah, it was fairly easy for me, but it just depends on what the airline environment's like when you finish. If there's a lot of activity, a lot of growth, a lot of expansion, then it's easier. But if there isn't, then unfortunately it tends to be compressed from the top down, where you have more experienced people who are maybe taking jobs they wouldn't have considered doing at a time where they could have moved into direct entry 777, for example, or got an A380 or whatever. Now suddenly those people are thinking, I wouldn't have an issue doing low cost in A320 anymore. So unfortunately you get the downward compression. But hopefully airlines, after the COVID, and hopefully things recover, return to cadet recruitment, because I think it's important to keep feeding in. Otherwise you'll suddenly have a generational gap where you've suddenly had no new ab initio pilots been recruited for like 5 or 10 years, which isn't good for anybody.
So if you don't mind me asking, how old were you when you made that switch from working full time to going into, right, I'm going to do this now, I'm going to get my CPL and hour building,
Yeah, so I dusted off my PPL when I was when I was 30, just after my 31st birthday. And then I found the job, actually I flew the 737 for the first time about a week before my 33rd birthday.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
So you've been working in a commercial airline about a year and a half now, just over that. What is it? Is it a job, or do you still have that love of flying?
It's an immense privilege to get to do what I get to do, and I still have to pinch myself to think this is what people consider a job. Asking after 30 years, maybe I might have a different answer, but for now it's absolutely incredible, and yeah, just delighted and just happy to be able to call this a job, despite all the upheaval and all the issues, you know, within the piloting community. Unfortunately, many colleagues have lost their jobs. It just makes you feel all the more grateful for what you have got and the opportunity that you have.
And what's it like flying in these COVID times at the moment? You know, coming out of lockdown, and what's it like? Can you explain a bit of, you know, how things have changed, if they have at all, really? Or
yeah, well, in terms of the actual flying aspect and the operation, there's probably not a great deal different. There's just a lot more procedures now to meet social distance requirements and comply with all the local laws to the places that you visit. So, for example, face masks are now mandatory. You know, that's one of the new things. And just trying to reduce the touch points, so moving away from paper in the flight deck, having everything on your electronically, so you don't have to share bits of paper and stuff like that. So yeah, largely it's not a great deal. The main part is just at the start and through it with trying to meet the social distance requirements.
During lockdown, you've written a book, How to Be an Airline Pilot in Europe. Congratulations.
Thank you.
It's a great read. But what can people expect from the book?
Well, it just walks you through all the different stages of flight training that I did anyway, and I just try and share the different things to consider. So if you start, for example, you've never been flying before and you want to be a pilot, right? Where do you start? Well, you need to go and book a trial flight. All right, how do you book a trial flight? Things to look out for, things to look for. You've done your trial flight, right? Your medical. I'm not an aeromedical examiner. I don't claim to be, and I'm not trying to give technical advice on how to pass your medical. I'm just trying to share important things like, you know, just before your medical, don't go out all night and, you know, have a heavy night, be well rested, all those kind of softer things that are going to try and help you through. Later on, just tips on how to get your CPL in terms of like hour building prep and so on. So yeah, I just tried to cover the journey that I went through. I didn't do a particularly good job of documenting it as I went through because I was just so busy trying to get through. But afterwards I thought, well, I've learned a lot, good and bad, so I just wanted to share those lessons.
Fantastic. Well, I'm really excited. You know, it's great. It's a great book, and I'm sure if anyone's watching this video, please, you know, find the link below and download us or get yourself a hard copy in the post.
Thank you.
Just finally, really, so we've had quite a lot of questions today, but if people want to contact you, how do they get hold of you? If they've got some questions about the ATPL route or modular training, how do they get hold of you?
On Instagram, Casey the Pilot, or Facebook, just drop me a message on there. I'll do my best to reply. Yeah, I would say they're the best avenues.
Well, I'll link your Instagram, I'll link everything for the book and the apps that you're doing, which we haven't covered really, but yeah, I really appreciate your time today. And
yeah, thank you, and thanks everyone who's supported Private Pilot Vlogs here, who's, you know, got some amazing videos too, and also myself. It's been really enjoyable just being able to share and interact with different people.
So thank you for watching this video. If you've got this far, please hit the thumbs up button if you like it. Don't forget to subscribe, and there'll be another Inside the Cockpit interview Q&A coming very soon. Cool. That'll do.
Nice one.